Did you know a barbarian can survive a fall that should kill almost anyone, that a wizard can escape chains without even touching a lock, that sometimes the most powerful rule in D&D isn't even in the rulebook? Today we're looking at 5 D&D rules that players and DMs get wrong some of the time. Whether you're brand new to the game or you've been rolling dice for a couple of years, there's a good chance at least one of these might surprise you. And trust me, number 5 might be the most important rule in the entire game. So let's begin. One of the most underrated and misunderstood rules in Dungeons & Dragons is gravity. Considering how often adventurers find themselves jumping off of buildings, plummeting from airships, and basically being thrown off a cliff by a dragon, it's a rule worth understanding. Most people know that falling deals bludgeoning damage, but what many people don't realize is that falling damage is actually capped at 20d6. That means once you fall around 200 feet, you're taking the maximum damage possible from a fall. Whether you're 200 or 2000 feet, the damage is the same. Which sounds crazy until you realize 20d6 can still kill most players. Now here's where things get a bit interesting. Because falling damage is bludgeoning damage, a raging barbarian gets resistance to that, meaning a barbarian can literally survive falls that would kill most other adventurers. And then there's Featherfall, possibly one of the most useful spells in the entire game, because Featherfall is a reaction, which means you can cast it while you're falling. In fact, that's exactly what it's designed to do. And here's a rule a lot of people miss. Using the optional falling rules from Xanatar's guide, a creature falls up to 500 feet immediately when it falls. So if you're pushed from a cliff, you go 300 feet down and hit the ground immediately. No time to think, no time to plan, you're just falling. But if you're higher than 500 feet, things get a bit weird. So you immediately fall 500 feet immediately, then on your turn you can act normally, and then at the end of your turn you fall an additional 500 feet. Which means if you're falling from an airship or a floating castle, you might actually have time to do something before you hit the ground. And here's my favorite part. At higher levels, heroes become almost superhuman. A barbarian can survive falls that should kill almost anyone. A wizard can save an entire party with a single reaction. And this is why gravity is one of the strangest rules in D&D. Another misunderstood rule in D&D is that objects and structures aren't just scenery. They're part of the game. They're just like creatures. They have armor class and hit points. That means doors can definitely be broken, chains can be snapped, and walls can be smashed. And yes, the barbarian can absolutely punch his way through some problems. The rules give objects armor classes and hit points, and as a DM, you're free to assign value that makes sense for the objects in front of your players. Whether it's a wooden door, a set of manacles, a castle gate, or even a powerful magical item. Now as a DM, don't feel like you need to stop the game every 5 minutes just to look up a chart. You'll find plenty of examples online, and they're worth reading because they help you understand the logic behind the numbers. But eventually you'll start getting a feel for it. You know roughly how tough a chain should be, how strong a vault door should be, or how much punishment a stone wall can take. And that's far more important than memorizing a table, because the story keeps moving. And here's the biggest thing players forget. Just because something is locked doesn't mean it has to be unlocked. Sometimes the rogue uses lockpicks, sometimes the wizard uses magic, and sometimes the barbarian uses a different kind of key, his fist. Because in D&D, almost everything can be destroyed. And once players realize that, they start solving problems in very creative ways. Before we jump into the next one, if you're enjoying this video so far, do me a favor and hit that like button. It really does help the channel and lets me know that you want more D&D content like this. Alright, so now let's talk about spellcasting. Spellcasting is probably one of the most misunderstood parts of Dungeons & Dragons, and honestly, that's completely understandable. When a new player joins the game, they're already learning combat, roleplay, skill checks, and character abilities. Then someone hands them a spell list, and suddenly they're learning an entirely new set of rules. The biggest mistake I see players make is assuming every spell works the same way. They don't. Every spell has components. They require you to either speak, they require hand movements, and they require maybe material components. And those details matter far more than people actually realize. Let's take Misty Step for example, one of my favorite examples. A wizard has been captured, their spellbook has been taken, their focus has been stolen. They're chained to a dungeon wall, most players assume they're trapped. But Misty Step only requires a verbal component, which means if the wizard can still speak, they can still cast the spell. And many DMs would rule those chains aren't nearly as useful as those guards thought. Because while Misty Step clearly teleports the caster, tables sometimes disagree on exactly what happens to the restraints. Either way, understanding spell components is incredibly important because they don't just affect the player, they affect the entire world. A clever wizard learns how to work around restraints, a clever bounty hunter learns how to stop spellcasters from speaking, and a clever DM can build entire encounters around those interactions. Then you have bonus action spells. Another rule that catches people out all the time: just because you can cast a spell as a bonus action doesn't mean you can cast every other spell you want on the same turn. Spellcasting has a lot of little restrictions hidden inside of it, and most of them only come up when everything starts going wrong. My advice: don't try to memorize every spell interaction. Nobody does. Instead, make a ruling when you need to. Keep the game moving, then check the rule after. If you like the official rule, use it. If you don't, change it, because the goal isn't to memorize every spell in the game. The goal is to tell a story with your friends. And while we're on the subject of weird rules, what's the D&D rule that confuses you and your table the most? Drop it in the comments below, I'll definitely read it, and I might even end up in a future video. Advantage and disadvantage are some of the best mechanics in D&D. They're simple, they're fast, they're somehow still one of the most misunderstood rules in the entire game. Most players know the basics. If you have advantage, you roll the 2d20s and you take the highest. If you have disadvantage, you roll the 2d20s and you take the lowest. Simple. But here's the part where people constantly get wrong. Advantage doesn't stack, disadvantage doesn't stack, and one source of advantage cancels one source of disadvantage. In fact, if you have advantage and disadvantage at the same time, you simply roll normally. It doesn't matter how many sources you have, one of each cancels out. Imagine a paladin uses an ability that grants advantage on their attack, but he's fighting underwater, which gives them disadvantage. So most players immediately just start to try and add everything together, but as rules is written, they simply cancel each other out, and now it's just a normal roll. This comes up all the time, especially with rogues, because sneak attack is one of the most misunderstood features in the game. A lot of people think rogues need to be hidden to use it. They don't. A rogue can trigger sneak attack in several different ways, most commonly by having advantage on the attack, or by attacking a creature that's distracted by one ally that's nearby. So before you tell your rogue they can sneak attack, double check the situation, because there's a good chance they can. And for DMs, here's my biggest piece of advice: don't stop the game for 10 minutes trying to find the perfect answer. Make a ruling, keep the story moving, and check the rule after, because players don't remember the exact dice roll, but they will remember when the game grinds to a halt. If you're enjoying these videos and want more D&D stories, rulings, and DM advice every week, consider subscribing. We're building a fantastic D&D community here, and I'd love to have you along for the journey. And finally, similar to the rule of cool, the most important rule that isn't really a rule at all, the DM is allowed to say yes. If a player wants to jump onto the back of a dragon, you can say yes. If they want to shoot the villain through the goddamn eye, you can say yes. If they want to hold the door against impossible odds so the rest of their party can escape, you can say yes. If they want to forge a weapon from a dragon's tooth, you can say yes. Because while the rules are important, they're not the reason people remember a campaign. Nobody talks about the time they correctly calculate a modifier, nobody tells stories about the session where everyone followed the rules. They talk about the impossible moments, the heroic sacrifices, the insane plans that somehow worked, the stories that felt like they belonged in a movie. Now obviously, don't say yes to everything. Some things should fail, some things should be impossible. And some actions should have consequences, but if a player comes up with something very creative, something memorable, something that would make the entire table cheer, don't be afraid to give them a chance, because sometimes the best moments in D&D happen when the rules take a step back and the story comes first. And that's why my favorite rule in the entire game is simple. The rules are here to create a game, the DM and the players is here to create the story. Those are my 5 D&D rules that players and DMs get wrong all the time, but I'm sure I missed a few. So tell me, what's the most misunderstood rule at your table? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and remember, the rules are here to create a game, but the DM and the players are there to create the story. See you in the next one.